Welcome to Distance Dialogue. On behalf of WVU Online, I'm Dr. Lee Silverman. Joining me representing our student ambassadors is Dr. Angie Milliron. Presenting today's topic, a front row seat to some of the country's largest events, is David Segen. David is the current owner of Bellacino's Pizza and Grinders in Stowe, Ohio, and The Kitchen on Front Street in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. He brings over 20 years of experience to his company with strengths in hospitality, event planning, logistics, and consulting. After graduating from Kent State University, David spent nearly 15 years working on some of the largest events in Northeast Ohio and with sports teams locally and around the country. David has led teams of over 1,000 staff and volunteers to pull off some of the most successful events in the last 10 years. He has led food and beverage operations for multiple NBA finals, concerts, Cavs championship, NCAA tournaments, presidential debates, and 2 Republican National Conventions, to name a few. In 2017, David decided to pursue his own business and focus on smaller community-focused hospitality with his 2 restaurants and catering company. He also spends his time consulting for large events across the nation and enjoys speaking with and mentoring the next generation of hospitality leaders. With a passion for his community and schools, David leads and serves on many boards and committees. He now lives in Stowe, Ohio, with his wife Jessica and 2 daughters, Harper and Peyton. Thanks for being with us today, David. Several students submitted questions for today, and I'd like to begin by asking you our first question. How did you prepare to become an entrepreneur/business owner, and how did you plan for the risk?
Well, thank you for having me today, and what a bio. That was an interesting, when you hear that, I appreciate the recap there, and it's an interesting take. I don't know if you ever truly prepare to go out on your own. It's a really big step. And so when you have the security that comes with, a corporate job, if you will, it's very hard to kind of make that decision. And from a young age, I always wanted to own my own business. And then I landed in the sports industry. And after 15 years of really working with some of the most incredible industry folks out there, it was really hard to leave that. Now, I was 35 years old. I had 2 young children, and I wanted to make a decision on what could I do to continue in this industry, but not necessarily at the same speed or pace of the NBA, if you will. That's a lot of basketball games. That's a lot of concerts. That life is very, very hectic. And so when I remember going in and telling my boss at the time that I was going to open a restaurant to spend more time with my family, he sort of laughed and said, I don't really think those 2 things go hand in hand. If you've known any restaurant owners, it's a grueling life. It's a tough schedule. We're open, nights, weekends, holidays, when people want to entertain and go out and have a good time. So, but for me, the big difference was, and the reason I took that leap of faith was because for the first time in a long time, I was able to kind of control my own schedule. So I wasn't mandated or dictated by a league, or, when Justin Timberlake was coming to town, I couldn't say, hey, Saturday works better for me than Friday. Do you think you could switch that? And that just isn't how it worked. So for me to be able to have that freedom and that flexibility was really the driving force for me. But when I made that decision, it was only because I had spent so much time with such strong mentors before I got to go out on my own. I tell people all the time when I speak to groups, if I would have done this 10 years ago, I don't know if I would have been successful as I am today. I just didn't know what I didn't know. And so when you look back at the decision, they always say there's a time for everything. And for me, I had looked at it and I was like, you know what? I think I have the chops to kind of take this to a smaller level. And like I said, because of those folks that I can still pick up the phone and call at any time if I need to, is why I made that decision to say, you know what, let's do this. And it's interesting, when I made that decision, I gave myself a 5-year plan. And I said, you have 5 years to figure this out, to get in there, figure out what's going on within the landscape and in the industry and your community, pay off any loans or debt or anything that you incur with this, and kind of get yourself moving. And that aligned right with my 40th birthday. So 35 to 40 was sort of that timeline for me. And my personality is very driven off of kind of setting those benchmarks, setting those personal goals for myself. Now, the only thing I didn't plan for, and I don't know that any of us did, was that 2 of my first 5 years had something called COVID right in the middle of the restaurant and hospitality industry. So that shook my world, obviously, a little bit, or a lot, if you will. But what it also did was allowed us to really pivot on this journey. And I tell folks today, if you're a hospitality establishment and you're operating today like you were pre-COVID, then you didn't learn anything from that, from a business sense, whether that's how we do things internally, how we deal with staffing. And it really changed my whole perspective on the industry. So a little bit of a rocky start that I didn't plan for, but I think because I had such a really strong foundation built from my time in corporate, I was able to kind of survive that. So that's kind of how I decided to go out on my own and take the leap of faith. And it's been 8 years now, and I haven't really looked back too much, and I'm happy where we've landed.
Well, thanks, David. And it's wonderful. Not only did you have a solid background and plan going into this, but you're paying it forward and mentoring others the way the mentors did for you. So in even this event here today, you're doing this. So it's really a pretty wonderful story, and we're glad that you're sharing this with us. Angie, would you like to share some additional student questions with David?
It's great to hear that you've had some great mentors along the way who have inspired you, and I'm sure you've been part of a team. And one of the questions from our student body is about the importance of being part of a symbiotic team in your field. And what are some of the best motivational strategies that you've found to promote team performance and unity within your industry?
Yeah, and I love that question, because for me, and especially if you've ever worked in the hospitality industry, and I hope a lot of people have had a chance to work in a restaurant or work in a bar or catering, or even when your first job maybe at an ice cream shop, whatever that is. For me, the policy that I have still as the owner of my own company is that I do not lead my team. I work beside them. And that is something that is really critical for me. And my team laughs a lot because, on a Friday night in my restaurant, we're certainly staffed and covered, but I guarantee you will find me bussing a table, running food, tinkering with something at the bar, or answering the telephone. And for me, my team is motivated, and every team I've been a part of, they really like to see their leaders working with them. And I have always found success where if they see me as one of them, then it really motivates them to kind of work and get the job done. Now, it's an interesting take where, even when I was in my corporate days, I would actually schedule time on my Outlook that says, literally, I think it said something like, leave your office. And I would literally leave the office and go and talk to our warehouse crew, see how they were doing. Did they need help unloading something? When we used to do dollar hot dogs back in the especially with minor league teams, I would go and wrap hot dogs for 30 minutes with our team. Because if you ever want to learn about your team's life and what they're going through and how their kids are doing in school, put on some gloves and a hat and roll hot dogs with them and put them in the bun and do that. And everyone used to say to me, my younger managers would be like, I can't believe you're going to go roll those hot dogs. And I'm like, this is the most thing I'm looking forward to today, because it gets me away from emails. It gets me away from spreadsheets. And I'm able to go and actually just sit and talk with our crew. So for me, I have found over the years that it's not always monetary or rewards or things like that motivate your crew. Now, don't get me wrong. They certainly could help. But at the end of the day, I think just showing and being a genuine leader letting them know who you are, what your clear expectations are, and really just being there with them. Arriving early with the crew, staying late with the crew, is really paid off for me. And, other folks may have a different perspective on that, but that's just something that's resonated with me, and is something I don't think I'll ever change the way I do things as I progress in this career.
Clearly, you've seen CNBC's Undercover Boss with
yeah.
explanation. That's absolutely what it sounds like. It's awesome. And I just have a personal question because I am instructional design and technology, and there's so much technology going on with how we promote things on social media. And what is the role that technology is playing for you in your internal and external communication efforts for what you're doing?
Yeah, so technology is certainly ever changing, and it's sometimes very hard to keep up with. But a couple things, I think that was a two-part question. One, sort of internally, we really try to communicate well with our team, because I'm a big proponent. I think I've already said it once on here. You just don't know what you don't know. So if I don't clearly communicate with my team that, we're staying open late on Friday because there's a home football game, that's going to have a ripple effect on our operation. So one of the things we've tried to do is when we send out our schedule each week, we actually include a newsletter in that so that all of our team's aware of the upcoming things for the week. I also have a manager outlook email that goes out. It's very hard in hospitality to get all of your team in at the same time, because we're all here across. Some are coming in at 6 a.m. and some are here till, midnight. So the closer clearly does not want to come in at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. for a meeting. So really we've relied on email, text, those types of group chat communications. But the hardest piece really hasn't been that internal. It's keeping up with the external. It's social media, all the different avenues where folks can leave reviews, and you want to make sure that you're responding to those and engaging with our clients to making sure that they're being heard, or you're problem solving if there was an issue. So communication moves very fast in this industry. And then also you're looking at all the third-party integrations that you've talked about with DoorDash and Uber Eats, and having the latest and greatest point of sale systems so people can check out at the table instead of having to wait for their server to print your check and all of that. So we're staying, on top of those things. But the one thing that a lot of students have asked me over the years is, do I see this industry being taken over by, AI, for instance, or how do robots play a part in this? And the one thing I've always said about it for now, or what I know in 2024, is I don't see the front of house operations being replaced with, a robot. Yes, we've seen some fast food service places doing more kiosks and less personal, but I still think and believe deep down inside that people go out to eat or to a bar or to a restaurant for that human interaction. They want to be wined and dined, or they want to be shown to their seat by a smiling face. But I do think there's some room for that technology in the back of house, streamlining how we produce food or how we have things coming down an assembly line or things like that might make sense. But I really hope that you're always greeted with a warm smile, with a friendly server, because if you're not, that really changes who we are as an industry. So really trying to pay attention to technology, but hoping that it doesn't overtake the human element and the human side of our space.
And the interpersonal skills offered are indeed something that AI hasn't yet mastered. And being met by that smiling face when I go into a restaurant in Morgantown or wherever I'm traveling is definitely something that can already set how my experience is going to be up front. And as an educator, one of the most common issues we hear about is the importance of soft skills, sending our students out to get jobs with the right soft skills. And as you're trying to fill openings in your different staffs, as a business owner, what skills do you seek out in potential employees? And second part of this question, how do you develop them in a fast-paced environment?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So in my space, I tend to have some younger employees, a lot of times, even sometimes first jobs. And we're dealing a lot with what you just mentioned, with some of those interchangeable skills where, yes, you actually do have to put your phone down for a few hours at work while we do these tasks and actually have a conversation with someone. So we're working with that. But I found a lot of success. One of my number one priorities is, especially in our younger demographic, is to really make sure we're hiring students that are involved outside the classroom. So we really look at that extracurricular piece. Our student athletes, our band members, our student council, whether it be scouts or whatever you're interested in, we have found that those students have a number of boxes that we can click. Time management. They're a little bit more extroverted usually, especially in hospitality. So those spaces, although it's challenging to work around their schedule sometimes, we have committed to that in my establishments, that we will foster a workplace that supports you in the classroom and then also with your extracurriculars, because that's super important. Now, the on-the-job training and that development piece can be challenging, especially with our younger students, where they might only be here 2 days a week, so you're not seeing them, 40 hours a week. You're seeing them 10 to 15. So sometimes it almost feels like, oh my gosh, every time they're here, it's like their first day again. So you kind of have to really have a repetitive process. And we have, some policies and checklists. We have a couple crew leaders that are specifically responsible for our onboarding to make sure that those folks don't kind of fall through the cracks. Now, that second piece was from a development standpoint. Now, if I'm not looking at my younger team and I'm looking at maybe more supervisory level or management level, I would say that almost 95% of my managers come from within. I'm a big proponent of offering them the opportunity to kind of grow their skills. Now, for me, that checks a couple boxes. One, they're already aware of me. They're already aware of our culture. They're aware of what the expectations are. They're not necessarily here to change things, where if I were to go out and bring in, someone from the outside, they might try to kind of rock the boat a little bit. So for me, although we really enjoy outside perspective as well, the internal promotion piece is really something that we like to build on and give these kids the opportunity to grow and get some core leadership skills that way. So that's sort of what our internal plan is.
Promotions from within definitely would strengthen the culture for folks to stay with your business because they feel appreciated and wanted. And so how do you foster and create your company's brand and culture then?
So we focus on, I call it the big three, which is something that I live by. It's on the bottom of our emails to our managers. And the three things that we look at are providing outstanding customer service and experiences. That's number one. And I tell our crew all the time, are things going to happen? Are we going to mess something up? Of course we are. Everyone's human. Mistakes happen. But it's how we respond to those and make sure that experience is rectified. That's number one. If we don't have customers, if we're not creating positive experiences, then unfortunately that usually translates to there are no jobs for us because we don't have the demand for our product or for our services. The number two is to lead our team with respect. I have worked in a number of kitchens or restaurants or environments where sometimes respect isn't always at the forefront of what they do. And that is something that I always say, because I was maybe treated this way one time, I want to make sure I never treat my own staff that way. And there are times, especially when you're dealing with younger folks, and even some of our college kids, they'll come at me maybe a certain way. And a lot of times I'll stop them and say right off the bat, hey, do we want to restart this conversation? Because I don't recall a time where I sort of came at you like that. So let's just kind of check that and really just respect each other no matter what this conversation is going to look like. So it's a really big sticking point for me. And I think it's translated throughout our team that, you may not love everybody here. You may not be best friends with them, and that's okay. But what we are going to do is that while we're here, we're going to respect each other and get the job done with the customer in mind. And then the last thing that we focus on is what matters. There's so many times that the world right now is just very, very fragile. And I think people are very quick to just be upset about things. and it might not even be because their food took a little longer. Maybe it's because their mom's sick or they got in a car accident earlier or whatever it is. But I always try to remind our team that at the end of the day, hospitality is supposed to be an outlet for people to provide, a more of a positive day, part of their day, if that makes sense. We're not delivering bad news. We're not wearing, first responder hats that might have a tragic situation. So let's lighten it up a little bit and let's just focus on what we can, control the things we can, and really just leave it at that. So I tell our team, if you can keep our culture and our brand to those three things, I think we'll have a pretty positive and promising outlook.
Yeah, your three tenets of outstanding service, respect for employees, and defining what really matters surely is a testament to the great culture you're creating with your business. And how has teamwork and planning evolved into partnership opportunities for you or your employees?
Yeah, so one of the things I do is whenever I look at my business within my city, we are a part of this community in every sense. So I expect full participation from my staff wherever we can and be in need of service, whether that be with our schools, whether that be with the city. If the mayor needs lunch because the city service crews worked overtime plowing the streets, then we're on it. If the school has something happen and they need a late lunch, and we're there for it. If the basketball or football team needs someone to come over and do something for pregame, we're there. And so one of the things that I embody is that will all come back to us in some way, shape, or form. If we show how we work as a team internally to our external partners, which is our community, they're going to recognize that. And now I truly believe that all of our employees, when they say that they work for us, are proud of that, that we have a good reputation, that if they're wearing their work shirt out somewhere after work, that brand is being well represented. And I really hold high expectations of the way we present ourselves and carry ourselves to those key stakeholders. So those partnerships are extremely valuable to me, and I hope that transcends down through our entire team.
Yeah, your partnerships to your local schools, businesses, and government definitely has strengthened your bond with the community. And I know earlier on this afternoon, you mentioned that you had great mentors in your past, but now that you're there, who do you look for? Who do you look towards for your own professional support now?
That's always tough. This was actually the hardest question that I had. And, oftentimes, and I talk a lot with other fellow business owners, especially ones in the small business community. And you almost feel on an island sometimes. You can feel a little isolated. You're not sure that other people know what you're experiencing. And I say that because when I was working in my former space with, fellow colleagues and managers and other folks, and someone right next door to me down the hall, and if you're having a bad day, you can pop in and say, hey, let's get out of the office for an hour, or let's go grab Starbucks, or you know what I mean? You don't necessarily have that when you're the owner or the leader, or you're kind of by yourself in a small entrepreneurial role. And it can be kind of tough. And what you want to do is make sure you do have an outlet and not just continually kind of suppress those bad days or those frustrations that you will. So for me, I've really found a core group of fellow entrepreneurs who, some of them are even in my same space. And I think, when I was out a couple weeks ago with a fellow restaurant owner, and we ran into some people and they were like, oh my gosh, what are you two sitting at the same table? Aren't you competitors? And, I quickly reminded them is that, we're not competing. The more that we can collaborate with other local businesses in our same space, then we all win. So if a night out and, some appetizers and a beer with a fellow restaurant owner makes you feel better because you can vent for a minute about staffing or supply chain issues or, a bad Google review that wasn't even accurate or whatever it might be, you leave that feeling like, okay, I'm good. I can do this again tomorrow. They understood me, where you don't want to take that home. Not that my wife and my family and they're not supportive, but a lot of times you find with family, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes they're going to say oh, like, it'll be okay. Like, you'll be good. You know what I mean? But sometimes you need that challenge from someone to say, well, why did that happen? Or what can you do differently next time? And really challenge us to make sure that we're thinking about things strategically and not just, oh, it'll be okay. That it's good. You know, you don't always want to hear that. So for me, that has been my outlet, to really embrace folks that are sort of in that same level as I am. And it's really been beneficial when you need that day for just support.
Well, that's all the questions I have from the student ambassadors. So I volley this back to Lee.
Oh, thanks, Angie. I'd like to thank our guest, David Segen, for being with us today. Also, a special thanks to Dr. Angie Milliron and to Joanne Hunt and Eric Merrill, who have been helping behind the scenes. For Distance Dialogue, I'm Dr. Lee Silverman. Thank you for joining us.